Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven.
And I am Jonathan.
And today we're recapping Gen Con 50. All right, what have you two been up to this week?
Oh, I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. It seems like there was some sort of event.
I feel like the whole episode is literally just our week.
Yeah, it's Gen Con. I will say this. We give advice about conventions pretty often. And I tried to take it. Although I found myself without water pretty often.
I remember at one point we're walking and you're like, I feel like we didn't take our own advice here.
Yeah, there was a day that I forgot my water bottle. There was a day that I didn't bring a backpack, so I didn't have storage.
I remember
for
that
a water
day.
Bottle.
I was your backpack.
There was a lot. That's true. Yeah. Can you hold this? Can you put this?
Yeah, I had a bag, and it's like, hey, can you put this in there? Hey,
Yeah.
can you put this in there?
A lot of handshake. I mean, there's a lot of people there. So, we often talk about, Robert says this often, he's bringing on the trip, hand sanitizer, throw lozenges.
And a bag of cough drops, yeah.
And I thought I made it out, right? So I got home. It was the eclipse the next day. I was feeling a little bit weird. I thought I was just a little tired. But then yesterday, definitely got hit.
The old con crud.
Got the old con crud. That's what they call it. But it's essentially a combination of things happen at a convention that are not conducive to good health. You stop, if you exercise, you stop doing that, which is the case in my life. If you eat well, you stop doing that.
Yeah, we had hamburgers almost every meal.
I mean, hamburger is grease, and it's great. I mean, it tastes awesome. It's fun. Not a lot of vegetarian/vegan options. I've been exploring that in my recent life, so that kind of flew out the window there for a little while. And then you're exposed to a vast amount of people carrying a vast amount of things that you might have not been exposed to in a while. So all that kind of combines at once. And
well, you also have usually less sleep.
Yeah, way less sleep. Yeah, another huge factor.
Which is another factor.
Way less sleep.
You also because of, Gen Con was sold out and it's full, and to get food, it's 15-20 minute walk combined with a 30-45 minute wait combined. And so a lot of times, if you're without a water bottle, it's you might go a couple hours without water.
Yeah, it's really... So anyway, long story short, I'm feeling that right now.
It's also worth knowing this is prime allergy season.
That's true.
The ragweed is up as well.
That's true.
I got hit with allergies a couple weeks ago.
So everything is good. So I apologize for my voice on the cast, and if I have to step away and clear the pipes, as it were, then I'll try to do that as effortlessly and as non-noisily as possible.
Yeah. So and we basically what is today? We recorded our last episode on the way to Gen Con.
Yes,
that's correct.
And have since had 1 day back from Gen Con. So pretty much the whole week was Gen Con.
This is Steven's first day back. He had yesterday when he was off sick.
Yeah, I was off.
The
I
old
took a sick day.
con ride.
So let's dive into it, shall we? What was Gen Con 50 like?
Gen Con 50, I think the synopsis for me up top, there's a couple games in particular I want to get to in a minute. But the general vibe, it was kind of weird in the sense that I felt like the big things had kind of been announced and shown off in advance of the convention. I knew going in, I was excited to check out L5R. There were a couple board games I was excited to check out. There were 4 or 5 of them. And, they'd kind of been shown.
They looked on the videos.
And not just a lot of times in the past, I remember last year, Destiny, I think it was the week before, they were like, hey, we're putting out a collectible Star Wars game. And there was no information.
Right.
You didn't know how to play, you didn't know, you just saw some cards and some dice, and check it out at Gen Con. Whereas this time it was we've seen, they had done L5R on the live stream. They'd gone through articles of rules and stuff. The board games that were, were interesting to me had kind of been shown.
Ex Libris, photosynthesis. Basically, here's a very easy thing to do if you're interested in tracking board games at Gen Con. You just go to Board Game Geek because that's where it is. That's where the people are, and that's where the the board game community is. What's the top 10 list? What's the top 20 list? And of those games, there wasn't really any... The biggest draw of those games was you could buy them probably for the first time.
Yeah.
200 copies, 500 copies, start at Gen Con, you get your VIG badge, you get in there, you get in the booth and try to acquire.
Right.
Yeah.
But as far as learning the mechanics or understanding how the game works, that had pretty much all been scooped. And a tale of the industry. A lot of that stuff came from Kickstarter, so you already had backers with knowledge and understanding of how the game's going to work and play out. And a lot of it is just promotional activities being less centered around Gen Con and more centered around a accurate release schedule. I think a lot of companies are doing less withholding information until a big moment at a con, because information is so much more easily attained and available. Like, if I can get a how to play out a month before Gen Con and then sell at Gen Con, that's a lot better than showing and selling at Gen Con, at that event.
Well, and I feel like the showing and telling at Gen Con has the potential to have a bigger impact, because if you hit, you really hit. It's like this surprise. People are excited. I think this is what Legion ended up hitting on. No one really knew about it.
Yeah.
It kind of, the Star Wars Legion hit. But the truth is, when you're talking about board games, I think there's something like 2,500 board games that come out a year, or something. Yeah. Some massive number. And so the risk you take by not announcing it beforehand and not showing it off and not sending it to press or media or these channels that can build the excitement around the game is that you do bring 1,000 copies of a game for the first time, and then you don't. No one cares.
It's hard. It's hard to track this info down. It's hard to stay
current,
hip to board
relevant.
games.
Yeah,
remarkably hard, actually.
In my former life, before I was an employee here at Covenant, I was a documentarian, I guess you could say, and I was down at South by Southwest 2 or 3 years in a row, right when the internet really sort of just like let loose all of the music industry. So like they had kind of stopped fighting. I think maybe Apple Music was starting, but basically you had anybody, and YouTube was getting big. Anybody that wanted to could put any music they wanted to online, and then anyone could see it. But because of that, the noise was just so much greater, right? There was just so much more decent stuff that the great stuff was getting buried, and the poor stuff was, kind of getting lumped in with the decent stuff. So it becomes very difficult to really like discern what the great things are, and that's I haven't felt that before. I really felt it this year at Gen Con, that it was a lot of stuff that was not necessarily super surprising, super exciting, and some of that could have been because all of the prep work and all of the excitement was up front, and just like Stephen was saying, was the first time you could buy it. But it was just kind of row after row of very similar looking booths.
Now I'll foil that a little bit, because I was feeling the same way, and we talked about that the first day. We did our walkthrough, and it was, there's really no groundbreakingly new mechanics. Now this is coming from a group of people who are not deep down into the board game scene.
And to be fair, we also covered a lot less board games this year, so we weren't getting into minutia. So I'm going on looks alone.
Looks, and I watched a couple of games play out. But every pitch started with, this is a Euro-style worker placement game that adds an element of bluffing, or that adds a hidden card mechanic, or that changes it up by making it a first past the post scoring system. Like, it was always categories of things that we all already knew and had played before, with a slightly different spin or a slightly different combination. And when I originally realized that, I thought to myself, well, maybe what has happened is that the board game industry went from Monopoly, Clue, etc., to this golden age that we're in currently, but it isn't really going past that right now. That maybe we've hit the next, phase of board games, and it might be a while before something new kind of spirals off. Legacy games kind of had an impact, but maybe there's some other stuff lurking out there. But there are two factors to that. One is, whenever I first started looking at board games, I knew nothing about board games.
You didn't know what
So everything was super new
and
exciting and seemed like a revelatory kind of experience. But then I talked to Eric Lang in an interview that will be going up or is up by now. He's now the head of design at CMON, which was previously Cool Mini or Not, that kind of rebranded to CMON. And he said that, his view of board games is as an art form. And just as art, even now, is not about some impressive new concept.
Right.
It's about taking the same old concepts, the same mediums, the same
disparate
ideas,
and making something
changing
new.
it, combining it, tweaking it, and coming up with your style or your. And so I started to view board games in a much different light. I think at that point that it was the new things weren't about brand new things. It's a board, you're playing a game. Like
Right.
there's only so far that you can go with that. But it was about how cleverly are you combining things? How seamlessly are you able to stitch together certain concepts? How can you turn this thing on its head by adding this thing? And so you shouldn't expect to find anything brand new.
Yeah.
But accepting them as art, you can look at them and say, yes, this is something that has truly never been done before, even if the things it's doing have been in their own silos.
And I do wonder, Eric talks about this in his own way, and that interview is worth watching. I do wonder if sort of the aversion that I feel whenever someone starts out by talking about a game as a, Euro whatever, with this kind of mechanic, it may just be me. It may be because I am so drawn to theme over mechanics that if they start off saying, you are this guy trying to achieve this thing, then I would probably be way more into it than you are trying to control this area so you can get this amount of points.
Well, that may also be a case of the people giving a demo and the goals they're trying to meet, right? Where that sounds like someone, when you're teaching, it makes a lot of sense to start by saying, here's what it is like, to give you a framework or a concept, right? It's like you play a new card game and it's like, oh, this is a card game.
Right.
Or this is a deck builder.
Right.
Or this is a worker placement game.
Much faster in the
It's like saying it's a watercolor painting.
Yeah.
But
painting.
at the same time, that's not exactly the best pitch for a game.
Right. That's very
so
true.
like the 30-second upfront pitch should be like, you could create a pitch for any game, but it's like X-Wing. It's like you literally get to get in the cockpit of an X-Wing and you get to fly around the board and you're fighting each other's. There's like
So
a skirmish
it's really
in space.
efficiency of demoing versus just impact of pitch.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting because you do have people go to Gen Con to demo, I think, number one, more than anything else,
I think they go to buy those games more, number one.
to get them, just get them in their hands.
Like the early access and it's like a treasure hunt. I mean,
Which of the hot games can I procure early?
I understand it entirely. I mean, you have a list going in. The hardcore Gen Con board game folks that I saw were all about how many of these can I get.
Right.
And that's really cool.
Yeah,
I love
and
that. I've done the same
That's
kind of
what
stuff.
cons really should be, is they are, especially in the internet age, right? They are the breaking down of like, what a convention used to be. Our dad used to go to conventions all the time, as people who listen to the podcast probably know. But one of the things that was cool is you could find all this weird stuff that you couldn't find anywhere else. And then eBay came along, right? And then it's like, well, I can find it on eBay. And then dedicated sites to
DA
doing
Card
this.
World. I mean,
Yeah, it
the
came
whole
along.
thing.
And so it does take away some of that. So it's very neat to see that people are still, in the tradition of the convention, going in there with that list and trying to get it and trying to see if there's something new. And I actually talked to somebody who was finding like sea urchin spines. Someone was selling sea urchin spines, so that you can still find that. And I think that part is really cool.
Sure.
Of the convention experience.
And I think going back to the board game concept we were talking about a minute ago, there is a certain sense, I feel like, in the industry at large, of most of the territory has kind of been mapped out. And now it's less about inventing or discovering new land and more about innovating on things.
Yes.
It feels more about optimizing for sure. And honestly, a lot of that optimization is taking place, I mean, in terms of marketability and even profitability. It's looking at how can we take a game that we invest this many hours in, design time and whatnot, and get more out of it than a single run of 10,000 copies. Like looking at expansions a lot harder, looking at new formats, looking at legacy style games that you have to essentially rebuy.
Want to buy
if you
multiple
wanna
times.
Replay the experience. And that's an element of it too. Like that's a part of the innovation that happens.
To add to that note, I think it's important not just from a profitability standpoint, but what that profitability allows a company to do, which is the more profitable a game is, the more you can actually invest in the success or
in that innovation.
in that game, right? I mean, it's like how much time are you willing to design and develop, and how good are you willing to make components, and how good are you willing, like all these question marks, gets proportionally easier the more successful the game can be.
If you're doing it right as a company, the more money you make means that should be the more money you should invest to give the people things that they want in the first place, so that they'll give you more money so that you can invest more. That is hopefully how it
That is the
works.
circle of
That's
life.
the
That's how
circle
you
of life.
expect it to work.
That is the
There
circle
are
of life.
often issues with that, but
So speaking of innovations and not inventions, I want to talk for a minute about Star Wars Legion.
yeah, I mean FFG, say what you will, and obviously we I think I said this in a various people at the con talking about coverage. It's like we tend to align and jive pretty well with FFG, obviously, like in terms of our offerings and the content that we're looking to get. They owned this convention to me. The only thing that I saw that was of exceedingly high buzz going in comparatively was L5R. Banners were everywhere. The marketing was happening. The parade went through.
And this has been a 2-year build-up.
2-year build-up. It's going to be hard to find somebody who has attended a Gen Con in the past that doesn't at least know what L5R is as a mythos. And it just kind of, at the beginning, I got there and it was kind of swamping the whole thing out. Like it was L5R was the thing.
There wasn't even room for other people to compete, really.
It seemed like that. And certainly there's a difference between, this is a board game announcement and a game like L5R, an announcement, right? There's definitely a difference. L5R is a lifestyle game. Like that's what they call them, right? Like this is something that could change the next X years of your life. I don't know that there's a board game announcement that feels as meaningful or impactful. Like this new Ex Libris or Photosynthesis, these games that were on all the hot lists. I want to get it. I want to play it with some friends, try it out, put it on the board game shelf. Might bust it out every month. But that's a lot different than choosing a clan, going to regional events, going to worlds level events, like having a community to be a part of. It's a much different thing. So I think there's a natural advantage to an announcement that centers around a more lifestyle driven game than a board game. So all that to say, I think L5R was kind of the item at Gen Con to start. And then I think that Legion was the surprise announcement that came out of Gen Con that was the thing to take away from, all of the announcements that happened at the con.
Yeah, and I think both of those games very much showcase that idea of, to me, innovation and not invention, which is, I look at L5R, it is literally an updated, optimized new version of an old theme and game and concepts and organized play. And it was the first day or day and a half, 2 days. It's like you have 2 700+ person tournaments happening for this new game. You have the samurais walking in. I know the moment where Steve Horvath was doing the chant.
Yeah, the bonsai.
The bonsai, and it's like dedicating. That was one of the coolest moments of the con to me. He's dedicating it to his friend who recently passed away.
Steve doesn't show a lot of emotion.
No,
but he can barely hold it back at that point.
Gaming,
but there was that. I mean, everyone wanted to get in and get a core set, which you could get at the FFG booth. And even there, I think they're really innovating on organized play, on how to launch a game. I mean, we knew a lot about this game going into Gen Con, and I think that's part of what made it feel so. The board games and the lifestyle games were like known entities, which is, I remember Arkham Horror came out last year. We didn't know anything, right?
I'd never even played. I've never seen it. Or heard
you just show up, you get a demo, and it's like, oh, here's this new game. That's awesome.
And
Destiny all at once. And that's just FFG last year. Even talking about CMON this year, it's like they had Godfather, Rising Sun, and Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, and it's like all of those were known entities and
Rising Sun isn't even out yet.
No, can't even buy it. And we were talking about it at last Gen Con.
100%. But to me, the big surprise of the convention was Legion, and upon first playing it, now I've had time to like parse it and watch the demo video that we posted back. And I said this to Alex, who designed the game. He gave us the demo. Afterwards, he asked me for initial impressions, which is so hard. You played literally a 1-hour demo game.
And
on camera.
While that's going on, you're thinking about the demo video.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about whether or not you enjoy this game.
Not at all.
It's like, what concepts do people want to know? What confusion might there be? Do we need to clarify
what questions should I be asking?
Yeah.
What
do I look weird on camera? Is there a meme that's about to
happen? What move can I make that's going to give us the most information about how this will actually function? And there's a lot there. So it's very difficult. That's normally the one. I remember it happened last year with Destiny. Tons of people coming up like, what do you think of Destiny? It's like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But the thing I told Alex in the moment was, it felt like there was an immense amount of restraint that was used on the game, and the game itself very much felt like answering the question, how would you make a Star Wars miniature war game And it was just trying to answer that question. And it was not trying to answer the question, which sometimes the new games will try to do at the same time, which was, how do you also completely innovate on miniature war games?
Yeah.
So I didn't come away thinking, man, like I left Destiny, and not the first time, after I played a handful of games of Destiny, I was very much like, this is a card game unlike any card game I've played.
I think you wrote a blog on that.
I did. I sure did. But it was doing something way different, right? And then Legion, though, it was just like, oh. And the more I dove in and found out about it, it's like, this is really just how you would do a Star Wars miniatures game.
Yeah.
At pretty much every turn.
Which is what it needs to be, right?
I think it's exactly what it needs to be.
I think we definitely should talk about L5R in the same breath, but if we just want to dive into Legion here, there's a couple of points that I would like to hit at. One is, I think there's obviously a collective sigh across a good deal of the industry that basically says another Star Wars game. Right, like I'm feeling it. I'm as much a Star Wars fan as anybody else. Now, Zach, you're probably not feeling it as much, but you know, I'm feeling that at this point. It's like, how much more is there to explore? And then I start to think about it, and it's like, well, let's think about the categories, right? Living card game, collectible card game, board game, you know, like ship combat,
RPG,
miniatures, role-playing game. You got small-scale ship combat. You got large-scale ship combat. Armada and X-Wing. You got small-scale Star Wars combat, Imperial Assault. You now probably
campaign
are entering. Yeah, the campaign is awesome. I think that's really the point of the game.
Yeah.
And they're going to launch that app, I'm sure, pretty soon.
Which this may actually relieve some stress on the skirmish modes, so that IA can be more Arkham-like and less skirmish-based.
But here's the question, though: is did Star Wars Legion hit the right spot when you're talking about categories and what remains to be explored in the Star Wars universe? Because it still strikes me as a game that can't get in AT-AT on the table. And I just don't know. Like, I don't know if you can have the Star Wars tabletop miniatures game that isn't at that scale.
Right. Well, I will tell you that I tried very, very hard to get someone to tell me if there was going to be an AT-AT on the table.
That's a great question.
And they would not tell me no. And they were very
sly about it. They
it.
couldn't do it to scale. I mean, if you look at
I think you could do
you can do double those tables.
The Rebel Trooper, and if you really like look at it, it would be
big,
nearly impossible. You would get one movement with it before it's on the other side, kind of stuff. So and you could do clever things like you just have the head on the edge of the board or something, right? Mm-hmm. There are ways to get clever around it, but if you had zoomed it out a little bit more, and you had where an AT-AT is basically the size of kind of like two of those speeder bikes or whatever.
Right.
And then everything else is just smaller. You focus less on, and I think this is probably the conundrum that they were talking about in meetings, would be you have less Darth Vader, Luke, etc. meaningfulness. Because they're tiny.
And more AT-ATs. Because really there's nothing else that size in the Star Wars universe.
Right, and more vehicles. So where do you draw the scale to make it work? I'm not saying that it's wrong, because I think it could be, but I think a lot of players would be surprised or disappointed by that one limitation, that it isn't quite zoomed out enough to have some of the most iconic Star Wars things, which are the AT-ATs. Yeah,
and I mean, the challenge there is when you think about the vehicles of Star Wars, which is something that hasn't been explored.
There's not that many that are land-based terrestrial vehicles.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, you can scrape the barrel on that one.
You would be surprised.
There's not that many iconic ones.
I'll tell you what, 90% of the ships coming out of X-Wing,
that's a good point.
I've never seen. I never even thought existed.
So, I mean, you definitely, it depends on where you go. If you go to prequel territory, there's an immense number, because you have all those droid carriers and the clone trooper carriers. And even in the originals, I mean, you have snow speeders, you have the general speeders, you have the guys on the back of the bikes.
And there's probably some wacky stuff on the television shows as well.
Holiday special.
Yeah, Clone Wars and Rebels.
You could ride a giant brontosaurus. That's what Boba Fett came in on.
My initial reaction, to Legion was very much, I was curious why they didn't do, because I'm thinking about it, it's like a 6x3 table, estimated length's like 2 hours,
right?
And it feels like the kind of game you're trying to do. I don't know if you guys have played Star Wars Battlefront or not, but it feels like Battlefront on a table.
Right.
Which is usually you're playing as like a trooper, and there's a bunch of them, and it's that big style war happening. And then occasionally you get to be the commander.
Right.
It's like you pop out and it's like, oh, I'm Darth Maul now, or I'm Vader. And you have this cool thing, but it's just like that like troop v troop, warfare, guns blazing moment. And it's like a scale up from Imperial Assault.
Yep.
Like Imperial Assault is very much more like
In the buildings.
we're in the Tantive and Vader's chasing down the troopers. Like it's that thing. It's not the like battlefield level scale. But if you go out another scale to like AT-AT, it's like I'm not sure there's anything else at the AT-AT size in the universe.
Just AT-AT v
And that's a fair point, yeah.
So that makes me wonder, akin to like an X-Wing where you have the epic mode with the big ships, and the big ships aren't to scale. They're slightly under, or they're sometimes significantly under.
They feel right.
They're to feel. They do definitely are way bigger, but they're not to scale. So I wouldn't be surprised if with Legion you saw an epic mode that was maybe a slightly bigger board. I don't know how you do that, 4 feet instead of 3. And then you have AT-ATs that are like 80% to scale or 75% to scale. And they still feel huge compared to like little Luke running on the ground. But then the natural place I went wasn't even AT-ATs. It was like, man, why didn't you have a 3x3 board version of this, smaller, kind of like X-Wing, that plays in like an hour,
A little skirmishy.
like 500
version.
points, that's skirmishy, and that you can have tournaments for. That can be a little more of a tournament game that's faster, and then it's like the reality is, I think part of that is if you did that, it's like it's in the same space as X-Wing and Imperial Assault.
Yeah.
Where the smaller scale version of this is called Imperial Assault. And like we have a game for that. So to me, again, and I didn't really fully appreciate this until we've been going to Adepticon over the past couple of years, and I've just been seeing it more with some of the people that come to our store a lot. And the reality of like a miniature war game is a lifestyle game, but not in the same way that a competitive game is. It's a lifestyle game in that, I'm consistently painting and building terrain and making my stuff look cool. And then it's like 2 or 3 times a month, I'm busting this out to play a game for 2 or 3 hours.
And this is what we talked about. This is to distill that idea. This is what I sort of gleaned from Adepticon, which is basically this. You buy your models, you put some time together to paint your models and your terrain.
And that's
really
part
cool.
of it.
And that's
part
part
of
of
it.
You've
the
already
game.
gotten to the game at that point.
That's part of it, yeah. And then the game is really only a sort of set of rules that help you randomly distribute your models into cool formations. Like, it's not even really about winning or losing. It's about, all right, the turn's over. Man, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. That looks pretty cool. And then once you get tired of looking at that cool thing, you go to the next round. And like, oh, that's cool. Look at all these cool models. It looks so cool. That's really, I think, really important to understand, at least in my understanding from Gen Con, of what makes a miniatures game fun and the lifestyle of someone who plays a miniatures game.
Yeah.
Case in point, in that demo, like Vader rolling through and lightsaber throwing like 3 or 4 of my rebel troopers down, leaving only the commander. That there was no part of me that was upset that I just lost X amount of people.
Right.
I was just like, that is cinematic as can be. Like, I absolutely love that just happened. Luke slicing a speeder bike in half and then running up and engaging with this
group of troopers.
That stuff is all about storytelling. It's verging into more of the RPG space. You're simply telling a story together. And it's not unlike train collecting or anything else. Like, you're making, it's a crafting style hobby that you then get to show off in epic and cinematic ways.
Yeah.
And for a vast number of people, they've been waiting for this kind of game
For a long time.
their entire lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understand that.
And I'm sure that there is more than one set of house-made rules to get Star Wars figures onto a board in a miniatures war game style.
I mean, honestly, at Gen Con and Adepticon, we've seen this. They have the old Wizards of the Coast miniatures, and they have the AT-ATs with the snow speeders, and it's the Battle of Hoth, and it's this giant board.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's literally, it's 4 people on each side, and it's just this and I'm super pumped for 2v2 Legion. I think that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But that is I think, when I'm thinking about this game and what the role of it is going to be, and you ask, is it too much Star Wars? And I do feel like we're at the point of like, okay, I got it. If it had been a miniature game that was geared to be competitive, that was supposed to be an hour long in tournaments and intense and like that kind of lifestyle, I would be much less interested, because honestly, like X-Wing and Destiny for me just hit those on the head for Star Wars, and it would be very hard for that to get replaced. But I enjoy painting, and I enjoy miniatures, and that's kind of like Imperial Assault kind of for me got squeaked out by Destiny and X-Wing, in that like, as far as
kind of living in the same space, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was living in that same space, but I still love the campaigns for Imperial Assault.
Yeah.
But this game, to me, it's like, man, a game I play maybe once a month, but like I can paint, right? And like I can slowly, and we can build stuff and whatever.
And you can paint some stormtroopers. I've seen.
I have painted some stormtroopers. Imperial Assault.
It's a very unique color set.
Yeah, it's very. It's white is surprising.
Painting,
It's surprising. Anyways, the reality though is that I really do. I feel like it has innovated on miniature war game without going over the top, and it really does feel like Star Wars, and it looks great, and it's just a whole new category. Like I know there's some Imperial Assault players that are like, what gives? Like, is this the end of Imperial Assault? No. Is this the end of X-Wing?
Well,
No.
it might be I won't say it's the end, but it's going to have an impact on Skirmish.
Sure.
Yeah,
But-
and may well it should.
Skirmish has never. I feel like Skirmish has always been plagued with a second to bat kind of mentality when it comes to design.
IA is it's like if you were trying to play competitive Arkham Horror, right?
Yeah.
It's IA is built to be a cooperative campaign against the Empire, and when that's taken away, I think the whole design of the game, it doesn't feel right. Right, it feels like
It's
being
stretch
shoved
and
into a
focus.
niche.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
always the problem. And we had 4x4 plagued it for so long, and
Absolutely.
and it's because it was
Well, and the main characters were
secondary
overcosted.
play mode.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, if anything, for the Imperial Assault skirmish players, if anything was really the thing that took it away, it was honestly X-Wing and Destiny, which is again competitive level Star Wars games that you can play in tournaments, and it makes sense. But I don't think Imperial Assault's success has suffered really almost at all,
Right.
because the campaigns have been so great and people love that.
Yeah, it's that old metric. It's like, is success how many people are playing it, or is success tournament attendance? Because I think that it is still very successful by that first metric. Even if you see tournament decline, again, it's not a tournament game per se. Like it wasn't built to be a tournament game. And as much fun as Skirmish can be, and it can be a lot of fun, I really do think it shines more in the campaign.
So we've had some, kind of what you would expect to be the off the bat critiques of Star Wars Legion. But the grand question is, was it worth doing, and should you be playing it?
Well, here's the deal. So I've watched this demo now probably 4 times through, because as I was editing it, first watching it you guys play, and then editing, and then effects, etc. Every time I watched it, I got more excited about it. So
There's something there then.
that means that there's something there. I'm not ready to go full hog board the hype train, but I'm certainly like queuing up for my hype train ticket.
Yeah, that train is in the distance, and you can hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where it really just depends on what you're wanting out of a game, in my opinion. And if you're wanting a competitive, super serious Star Wars experience, I would honestly point you in the direction of Destiny or X-Wing. But if you're wanting a hobby, and you love Star Wars, and you want to tell a story on a board, and you are interested in building or painting and putting models together and all this stuff, I think it hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Like for that thing, right? That miniature war game.
Yeah. I will say, like, a lot of times when people think about innovation, they think about adding something, creating something new. But really, a lot of times what innovation is taking away parts that aren't important, right? Or that can be streamlined. And we talk about that a lot. And I think this does that very well. I've demoed or watched you guys demo plenty of miniatures games now through Adepticon. And so I kind of get an idea of what like the standard rule set is. And this is just taking it and applying Alex Davies' now years of experience to make it into something that I'm excited about, not because it'll be a simple game or like, have a beer and hang out game, but a game that really anybody can play. I mean, if you go back to the demo and you watch your first round, Steven and Zach's first round, it takes about 30 minutes, maybe 45 to get through. The second round takes 10, right? So if you're looking to get a friend into miniatures gaming, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to do that.
It's a known entity too.
That's right. You don't have to buy into anything.
To sell somebody on 40K, you have to sell them on 40K the universe,
Right.
and then you have to sell them on a miniatures game or some combination of those in
Right.
order. most people you do not have to sell on Star Wars.
No, all I have to say is Rogue One. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's like, we've
On
got
the
Star
table.
Wars. You understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what we do is we, create these models from the Star Wars universe, and then we watch these battles unfold and kind of play that out. That's an easy sell to me for a lot,
we'll drink some
lot
beer.
of folks. And I regarding innovation, there's a lot of question marks about components and FFG's desire to throw tokens at everything and
Dice
various
and all
things and
that.
everything. I want to provide a little perspective on that because I've thought about that quite often myself. Arena Rex, for instance, incredible miniatures game. Ultimately, if a miniatures game is about seeing the experience unfold, the rules should be as light as possible.
Yep.
Because then they're just getting in the way of the unfolding. You don't need it to be accurate. You need it to be thematic and cinematic. So when it's like, well, why not D6s and measuring tape? It's like, okay, here's a reason. Is because when I get measuring tape out, I'm not playing a game anymore. I'm putting a shelf on the wall.
I'm glad you said that. Like, I'm super intimidated by rulers, and I don't know why.
It's you pull out your Craftsman 520 or whatever self-locking tape, and then you get out your dice that have numbers on them. That's a different experience than a clickable range ruler that comes in a core set that has Star Wars iconography on it. It's different than a die that I roll, even if it is fiddlier. A D6 with a symbol that is designed to be in the Star Wars universe is way different than a 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So what FFG constantly does, and this is why they have their fans and why they have their detractors, is they favor theme and flavor over practicality a lot of the time. And I think if you're into that, and that's why a lot of people, whenever they see an FFG game on a demo video like ours, they say too fiddly. This is just like stuffing all this stuff unnecessarily. But it's quite different when you play the game and you realize that you've been wrapped up in it because of the decisions that were made to include all of these thematic things in it.
Yeah.
Right? Destiny or Legion just would not work to me with a tape measure.
Yeah.
That's not Star Wars.
2 pips on the card versus a 6-inch mark is a different story. The 6 inches outside the world.
I also think inherently a tape measure more than a D6, but a tape measure also makes it seem like you need to be more accurate.
Yeah.
Yes.
When,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When I don't think... That's why, to me, Legion is not going to be a game I ever play in a tournament. Where it's like, I don't want to argue about whether I had enough movement to get in base-to-base contact with the barrier, barricade that's literally right in front of my model. It's like, reality is like, those little measuring things, it's like, and it, play it how you want to play it, but it immediately removes you from like the, did I quite make it?
Yeah.
Right? Did I get millimeters enough to do this thing?
Also, for me, it's that old, I always forget if I measure from the front or the back of my model.
Well, you can fix that one really easily. With
And I will note on
just put them in.
on that particular vein, the range ruler is pretty insane.
it's cool.
And
I love the way that it works.
well, and the thing that took me from like, man, it's this giant range ruler with these parts that you can put into it to make it longer, like range 5 or something. But and I think it was even said that each bit is 6 inches, like each segment. So you could technically use a tape measure if you wanted to, which is your prerogative. But the reality is that it's designed to look like a Star Wars thing. And then it was mentioned, it was like, oh yeah, you can paint that. And then it was like, of course you can.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
actually pretty great.
There's something else that I think is really worth noting about the movement templates in particular, is that if you are moving, let's say, a stormtrooper, some sort of unit that can go omnidirectional, it is just the same as a tape measure. No problems, right? You just put it there, you keep it straight, and that's as far as the thing can go. However, you've got speeder bikes, right? You've got vehicles, and the vehicles only have one part where the template can go in the front. Now, this is a super elegant solution, super simple, and this is why watching the demo 4 times is very helpful, because like you start to realize there are certain things that they can do because of the templates they couldn't do because of a tape measure. So if you have a speeder bike, you stick that template in there, then you can waggle the second part of it, and that's how you move the speeder bike in a nice like arcing motion. It would be way fiddly, to use a term that we've been using, to do that with a tape measure.
It
and
always sucks
feel
to use it
nearly
with
as
a tape
good.
measure.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm even
Turning is awful. 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch.
I'm also picturing X-Wing in particular, if the dice was actually just a D8.
Yeah.
and it was like 5, 6, and 7 are hits, and 8 is crit, and it's like.
No.
That's way less good.
Yeah,
Like
right?
when I roll
Very
3 hits
simple.
and I feel like it's 3 hits.
Yeah. These are simple things.
These are basic Gestalt theories. That
but it's
like,
easy to miss.
Yeah,
exactly.
So
that extra time to translate a number into a symbol in your head is going to take you that much out of the game, even just a little bit.
We need to move on to Alpha Var and other
Yeah,
things.
that's where I'm about to head.
What is your general impression of Legion at this point?
My general impression is that it is the war game I didn't know I wanted. And I'm excited. I enjoyed Pain and Imperial Assault, but the idea of a game that I can have as a hobby, I don't need another competitive game. I have too many.
Yeah.
The game that I can have as a hobby and relax and enjoy and play in that way every month or two is certainly worth. I mean, that's ultimately what Imperial Assault became for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I play it once a quarter maybe, and it's usually either at a tournament or skirmish or a campaign. And this is a game that sets out to do that in the first place. So I'm very excited. Obviously, we're saying all of this having played a single demo on a 3x3 table that's not 3x6.
Yeah.
And I also really hope and imagine that we get to see a lot more of the vehicle scale things happening. Snow speeders, if they start going prequels, it gets crazy. But once that really becomes a part of the game, and just the idea, like doing the math, it's like knowing that you can run 30 Stormtroopers and Darth Vader on a table.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That
Like
is
picturing that's pretty
really
cool.
nice.
Yeah.
I'd say similarly. I'm just less inclined as a human being to get involved in that kind of a hobby, but I do think there is a vast amount of people who are already in the space who have been waiting for a game like this. A lot of them have known it, have been asking for it for a very long time. Some of them haven't known it, and I think a lot of people, this will get them into war games for the first time. I think this is the first one that will make enough sense. Models looking good, painting, modeling, easier to put together apparently. Like,
That's the number one thing for
easier
me,
to click
actually. I
together
hate
and-
gluing models together.
paint. Now, for some of the more, like, the really serious miniatures wargamers, I don't know if these models are going to be quality enough. I mean, they looked good on the table, but compared to something like an Arena Rex model, there's a definite difference
Oh, my goodness,
in
yeah.
the quality. So
And
we'll have
the
to see.
skill required to put it together. That's the line. Or
Yeah, we'll have to see how that shakes out. What I would say is there's a propensity for people to have an immediate opinion for whatever reason by watching some amount of people play a game in a rushed environment at Gen Con. And that is a very weird way to make like a black and white decision about anything. So I would say let's wait, let's get our hands on the game, try it out.
Yeah.
Like play it in your local store for a while, like see some models. We'll probably be doing some videos, I hope, on how it plays and kind of unpacking some of these concepts. But if you're on the edge of right now, I don't know, like that's not a license to be like, this sucks, right? Like you have to recognize by now that FFG has very rarely just whiffed. And so it at least you owe it to yourself. Just like CMON is getting this way for me too with Eric at the head. I'm willing to look at anything that they're throwing out. Same thing with FFG, like look at the track record, look at the data. I've typically enjoyed most things that they put out. So especially with Davey being the guy.
I was going to say,
behind this.
Alex Davey gives me a lot
I do
of
trust in
confidence.
Alex. He started at Wave 4, I think, in X-Wing. He's done a great job. Jam Master was a weird thing, but there were a number of reasons
That's a caveat.
potentially for that.
Yeah,
But yeah, give it a chance.
Davey is, I think, very concerned with being a good designer, and this is, I think, his baby. This is
it's
all
his whole production. Yeah.
I trust him a lot, and I think that he has taken a lot of lessons from X-Wing since he came in late. A lot of times when that happens, you get to see, well, I would have done this differently, and now he has the opportunity to take those lessons and actually put them into things. And again, having watched the demo 4 times, I see a lot of small things that could become big points of joy for people. So I am cautiously optimistic. I think Steven's right. I don't think anyone can really have a strong black and white opinion at this point.
Yeah.
But I think it could be a really great way, if nothing else, to get your friends, your family into wargaming.
It wasn't a no.
Not a no.
And any miniatures war game starts as a no for me.
Yeah, and that's
That's like Arkham started as a no for me.
100%.
So it had to move the needle, and it definitely did.
And one thing I want to note, my final kind of point on Legion at this point, and I'm sure there's more to come, but I think that it has been simplified in all of the right ways.
Yep.
Where
So far.
so far I've seen a 200-page rulebook is immediately kind of off for me. If I'm spending half my time looking at a rulebook to play a game,
Not really a game
it's not
so
my
much.
thing. And again, tape measures are another one of these. Like, it's just like there's certain elements of the game and the way activations, and even just the reality of he built in a back and forth flow to the game instead of, because I played the Miniature War games where it's all of my things go and all of your things go.
And to be fair, that's kind of like the entry level mechanic
Innovation,
right now. And I haven't seen a game that doesn't do that for a very long time.
Yeah.
But they do exist. Like the classic ones are like that for sure.
So yeah, I'm excited to see more. We'll,
Excited to see. I think I will firmly put my stamp on excited to see more.
Yeah. Well,
I'm definitely excited at this point.
Yeah.
We'll see if that excitement gets paid off or not. So moving on to L5R.
yeah.
700-person tournaments. People
Crazy,
scrambling
by the
to get
way.
these core sets. Yeah, the crazy opening
Sold
ceremonies.
out.
Sold
By the
out.
way.
Crazy.
Also, Twilight Imperium 4th edition. Sorry to interrupt there,
Yeah.
Zach, but that is an important thing that happened pre-Gen Con, and that sold out as well.
And that's another one of those, it's like, well, we kind of know how to play. I think they posted the rule book even, and it's
Yeah.
not a new game. It's just
think we'll ever play
here's
that.
here's a better version of this old game. But yeah, L5R, seemingly a lot of excitement. They announced an October 5th release date. They announced a launch event where stores can host this 3-part series of events with promos and stuff. They've announced all this stuff going on. General vibe right now?
Honestly, I'll be honest. I felt a sense of almost nervousness across that entire player base. I think we had a lot of old L5R players coming in not really knowing if they're going to like it or not.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the players did.
Yep.
I think that conversion did happen. I think some of them, not for me, like definitely got out of the wagon, as it were. The percentage of each, honestly can't say. I was able to talk to a good friend of ours, Travis, who used to come to the store, a great Netrunner player. Really funny, actually. Grant and Travis both were playing Netrunner a couple of years ago here in Tulsa. And they were in the store for the first time together at the same time. And it was kind of like there's almost like a showdown that happened. And I found out now that it was because they were like opposing clans in L5R for like 10 years.
Oh, dang.
And they had said, we played L5R together, and kind of laughed it off. But there was always an intensity when they were playing, because they often found themselves in the finals. Great players, just incredible players. And there was more to it than just, am I better than you or not? There was a definite politics there. So then L5R blood runs deep. So I talked to Travis about it. I've talked to Grant as well, and I'm actually using a lot of what he talked about in a blog that's coming up. But Travis said he's a very even-keeled guy. He's the kind of guy I would go to for real information, maybe slanted a bit on the practical / realistic, as opposed to hopeful. Okay. He said, he was 3-0. He was playing Scorpion, I think, which,
Boo.
yeah, shame on him.
Literally.
Yeah, and he said, I like it. So I like the game. It's not off the table. I like the game. I worry that it is too long. I worry that it takes too long. And I worry that there are simply too many moving pieces to attract the same amount of people that were in the original L5R.
Right.
So, and I think that if we're looking for a platform to either overcome or sink L5R, I think that is the pillars of the platform. Is it too long? Is it too complex? Those things are probably about the same thing. So is ultimately this game just too complex?
Yeah.
That's the one critique that was levied against it, but that was a concern.
Yeah.
Well,
as the day was
certainly.
going.
So I have some news on this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Some breaking news. Just kidding. So we got core
Someone just
sets,
handed Zach a sheet.
and I spent my day off on back from Gen Con opening, organizing the core sets and building 6 decks.
So that's where they went.
Yeah. They're actually under the counter, built decks, sleeved, ready to play.
Oh, nice.
But I built 6 decks and then played a couple games and then tweaked all the decks, now having a new understanding of goodness and badness of general things, and played another game last night. And I played a game against Tim, and I was playing Phoenix Clan, which I'm currently feeling like is a little fiddly and not quite there, but fun.
It has some weird spell
It's
ring
like
stuff.
It's the kind of thing that we'll maybe get to that in a different.
Kind of like a
podcast.
Rube Goldberg
But
machine.
Phoenix Clan versus Tim was playing Crane, I think. I think it was Crane. And the opening, because we have both at this point, he's been playing with one of our locals, Zach, not me, has printed out some L5R decks from the previews and stuff, and they've been playing in the store a little bit. I've played the demo games and have played some games since then, and now we're both using, because the tournaments at Gen Con were one core set only.
Yeah.
So be aware, it's one core set only. Like
one core set only always is less enjoyable.
It's just more like a basic game than like the actual game that you play.
Yeah.
So we played a game, and after the first turn of that game, my eyes were completely different about it.
Okay.
Because
tell me a story.
It was just like, when I don't know if you've had I had this moment very distinctly in X-Wing where it went from like, oh, we're flying with starter stuff to like it was so distinct because
the game.
My list was the list that was on it. It was like, oh, this is a real list versus their like random stuff they put together, and it was just like, oh my god, like my list is doing things. So with this deck, it was like we both had like, it was a crazy turn. We both actually broke a province on the first turn, and it was just like out of the gates, swords are flying, arrows are swinging. It was just crazy, and the whole game felt like that.
Yeah,
and it was a 3-turn game.
It definitely seems like when you're on one core set, you're less likely to play the game well, just because you don't know the amount of risk that you can actually take in any given situation. So you're just less likely to swing with 9 strength,
right?
Because something could go catastrophically wrong. You don't know the cards, you don't know. But once you have a better readout of what is actually risky or not, then the games probably go a lot smoother and a lot faster. So I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, and I mean, we're still nowhere near experts at this. And there was a lot of like, I have to look at each ring and see what the abilities are. And I have to like make sure this is how this works. And I had this hilarious moment. I had my clan champion who has 4 glory that was honored. So she was 8/8.
Yeah.
And
tough.
I swing in, and Tim has a character on the board that if it's blocking by itself, you can pay 1 to force your opponent to bow one of their attacking characters.
Wow, yeah.
And I just sent her by herself because I had no idea what that card did. So you have little moments like that. But the first turn in particular felt like we were playing a different game.
Cool.
Like a fast-paced thing. But I do, even under that understanding, like I think this game is going to take 45 minutes to 60 minutes to play. I think tournament rounds are going to have to be an hour and 15 minutes. And I think that means, and early on in those games, I remember the first couple times I played, it's like, there's so much going on, and none of it is directly tied to how I'm trying to win this game.
Yeah.
It's weird, and there's not permanent, because of the way the fate mechanic works. Every turn your character loses fate, and if they can't, they go away. That's how they leave most of the time, unless they get assassinated. But it's so not what I'm used to. It's just, it is a concern in that I feel like it's difficult. I feel like you're going to lose a lot of games up front, and you're not going to know why.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating to people.
Very frustrating.
We talked about incompetence, losing based on incompetence being the way out of any game.
Yeah,
now, the trick, though,
good.
I think the other side of that coin is there's so much fog in the war that you also may think you know why you lost, but not really why you lost.
Yeah.
And so you may be willing to keep playing anyway because, like, you don't realize, like, there's a ignorance is bliss kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Because it's that kind of confusing, and there's a lot of the pieces going on. But I think if for the people, and this is the trick, right? I think with something like Destiny, it's so easy to learn, or Netrunner, even core set Netrunner from the beginning.
Although people would debate the Netrunner claim.
Whether or not Netrunner is easy to learn, yeah.
I mean, I can teach you Netrunner in 2 minutes.
Well, now, because you're out of the course. So that, I mean, I'm making that point to say that like it's possible as L5R, as we get people who are experts, they can then disseminate that information down in a much more effective way.
A lot of people cite Netrunner as one of the most complex games, actually.
Yeah.
So,
which it feels like basically breathing to me.
yeah. So, anyways, there is this, like, there's a lot of things going on, and it's very different than most card games. And so, unlike something like Destiny, which I do feel like you pick up very quickly, and it's very fun and light and quick, and you're not committed an hour to a game, it's more like a Thrones 1.0, where it's longer games. Yeah. It's there's decision points that have a bigger impact. Like there's 3 or 4 main decisions, and if you know how to make those, I was telling Tim this after our game. It's like I feel like you either know how to make the big play happen or not, and if you can't make the big play happen, you're probably gonna lose.
Yeah.
And you have to understand what your opponent's big plays are. But unlike Thrones 2.0, I don't feel like one misplay means that you're going to lose, and it's going to take you an hour to figure out you're going to lose.
It does seem to have there's some nice catch-up mechanics. Not even necessarily catch-up mechanics, but it's not where you get buried. So yeah, I think as people, I really do think there's a skill gap right now. Because I know that Brad Andre is the guy, one of the designers, was talking that they were getting their games in 30 minutes or less.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But they were also, I think they were intending to make a more noble game. I think that was a lot of the vision of it. I remember, I think it was Eric or maybe Nate talking about wanted it to be the kind of game where you might sit down to like a glass of tea and slowly kind of, sort out who wins this, like Go or anything else, like kind of that traditional, Eastern style game.
And there's definitely a space for that. I mean, I think if people come in thinking it's going to be Destiny, but with L5R, like they already have a Destiny. They already have these light games. This is going to be a bigger game, but at this point in the FFG lineup, like they need that. I think there's a niche for it.
And it's going to really come down to, and this is just the hard reality. Like I played second edition more recently of Thrones, and it's in a way better spot than it was. Like as far as your ability to maneuver, change the outcome, circumstances, whatnot, more economy. There's more play going on more economy in Thrones just means more play because you have more events, you have more characters, etc. So there's a lot more room to catch up and those kinds of things. I think the question that a player who's interested in a deeper game has to ask is, do I want to be in Westeros or do I want to be in Rokugan? I really do think you have to make that choice. And there's going to be some players that want both, that can handle both.
I think you can actually probably keep up with both.
But if we've learned anything about LCG players, it's basically the format doesn't succeed because you're spending, $30 a month or $40 a month or 50 or 80. Like that's kind of a collectible range at that point. It's I can play my one game, stay current for $15 a month. And so there are going to be a large number of players that are going to have to, they're always trying to choose their LCG, right? What is my lifestyle game? And it does come down to Westeros or Rokugan at this point. And so my hope is that a lot of the players who came from old L5R tried the new one, said, it wasn't really my thing, but I like the idea of this format. What else is out there? That they might then say, I love Game of Thrones. And this is actually a different take that I enjoy more. It's a bit more streamlined, actually, in a lot of it. It's actually a less complex game. And I never thought I would say that about Thrones.
Yeah, it is.
It's a less complex game. You have a singular kind of objective, get the 15 power. And it's pretty easy to understand how that happens. So I think I hope a lot of those old L5R players, if they are not interested in the new version, would find their way to Thrones. Because I think that it hits a very similar part of the brain as classic L5R.
And I think we will see. And if the game can get down to consistently like 45 minutes and the round times can be an hour, then I think it is very much like Thrones in that way. And it may be the case. But I actually think that if you're looking less for a competitive game and more for a hobby/lifestyle, where like L5R, if the tournaments aren't about necessarily winning, but being a part of your clan. Because like when I think about LCGs, I know that a lot of LCG players are not what you would call competitive players, where you have 300 or 400 people show up for Worlds and thousands of people playing the game. A lot of people playing at the kitchen table, at the pub, in the local league night, in the local tournaments, and they're never really going above that. And so if you do want to sit down to a game, and this is sort of like the war game earlier we were talking about earlier with Legion, it's like if you want to sit down to a game that is going to take more time, that is going to tell more of a story, and that is not just like let's grind it out to like train and get better at this like competitive game, I think it fits in that slot a little better, and they are focusing on the story.
Yeah, the OP seems to support that, and I think that's really worth noting with L5R is the stuff that they're doing that's new and inventive for the organized play, in a way that may incentivize people who aren't in that expert class to still come to tournaments and to still gain some sort of mastery over it, which is again what the game needs.
And they may have hit both. They may have hit the middle ground between the longer game and still the tournament game.
Yeah,
because I do think that this is the pinnacle of the Nate French card game phase game.
Yeah,
where you have all your phases. You're talking about Netrunner, right? I think why Netrunner seems less complex to some of us is that everything you're doing is a choice of 6 options. Gain a credit, draw a card. That never changes. It's your turn, you're doing it. It's their turn, they're doing it. But like what I can do in the, rings phase, what I can do in the conflict phase, what I can do in the draw phase, it always changes.
Yeah.
So I have to learn 7 different ways to play the game.
Each phase is really its own game.
Yeah. So I have 7 essentially mini games that I have to learn. And I think this is as far as it can go. I don't think you can push that format any further.
Yeah, it's like do not add more to a game like this.
I think they should have dropped Imperial Favor altogether.
Yeah.
That seems like an add-on that is completely unnecessary.
I think if anything, but again, it's like what's the goal? And if you want it to be the tight-knit tournament game that is like faster and you can do that whole thing, I think simplifying it is probably useful.
Yeah.
But I'm just not even sure that was the...
Yeah.
It's like, no, I want
probably
this...
wasn't even
it's like Imperial Favor is just a part of the story.
Yeah.
It's like...
You wanted to get the Emperor in somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like...
Somewhere.
That's the thing for it. I'll be curious to see the general reaction after it comes out, because that's always like the big thing. But for me, it's definitely not. It's in a category of game that is not, maybe for like it was for Legion for you. It's not right up my alley, but I really do like that universe, and I like what they are doing with the clans and the tournaments and whatnot. And I do enjoy playing, but like I couldn't play a 6-round tournament of that. Like my head would just like I'm gonna be over at the Destiny table playing 3 times as many games. That's just my style of game, right? But it is a very unique entry into a very unique category of LCG.
And just essentially keep your eyes open. The same thing with Legion. It's
Yeah.
like we need to play this 100 times.
Yeah, and we need to
fully.
get it out in the general population. We need some people to really start taking a crack at this and figuring out what decks are the best, the decision points, like Zach was saying. I mean, I think there are things inside it that we don't see. Yeah, we need some guidance on it.
And I will be curious to know what both of you think after you've played with constructed decks.
We'll try to do
Just
that.
3 or
Yeah,
4 games.
I like that.
So, any other notable games?
Yeah, can I talk about Simon here real quick?
Yeah, hit it up.
So talk to Eric, and Eric Lang is a fascinating figure in games. We actually kind of caught him, I think, at the very beginning of his ascent to this kind of new place. I mean, when FFG really started making games, he was their game designer, right? He and Christian friends and that kind of a thing. So we started there. Now he reached a prolific level at this point by last Gen Con, I think. Yeah, multiple games, known in the same way as even almost a Richard Garfield type character. So very well known. Now has decided to take on the role of actually, pushing a vision on the industry as opposed to adding games to the industry. So he's now at Simon, and this is, as I said, the rebranded Cool Mini or Not, and he's leading the entire design games department, and they are trying to establish a brand of games, similar to how FFG established a brand of games. You kind of know what you're getting with an FFG game. Twilight Imperium really set that tone, right? And that's what we're talking about, theme and components and this kind of thing, big production games.
And at the time when that first came out, it was very much like, who's going to pay this much for a game?
Yeah.
No retailer's going to stock it. And that's why do you have all these bits instead of cardboard?
Absolutely. And so Eric is taking a vision for Simon and trying to influence the entire industry with those offerings that they're making. Trying to be a big, serious player, which they already really are. But having that kind of synthesis with a single vision at the top is going to be monumental for that company. Because previous to this, it was essentially Cool Minis.
Right.
With a game system. Whether it's Rum and Bones or whatever it is. Like, yes, perhaps the systems are pretty cool or good or whatever, but you were there for the miniatures, the models. And so Eric taking that concept of tangibility and of having productions. He's obsessed with the idea of games as productions that go well beyond the idea of just a basic game, but really investing in any of the design and components and tangible things that it takes to put you into the universe and making games that make you feel a very particular way. So I'll let him, regale
Talk
you
about
guys
that in the video.
on that
One
video.
thing I think is really worth pointing out that Eric particularly has transitioned into, and I think one of the things that he was talking about why he likes this position so much, is that one of the things he's been thinking about recently, if I can put words in his mouth, is basically using aesthetics to teach mechanics, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
I think he
it's
gives an
smart.
example of like there's a piece of art in one of these games that as you complete it, it becomes this piece of art. You don't have to write in the manual, complete this piece of art. Like, everybody knows that, right? That's step one of being a human being.
I have a goal here to complete
I have a
this
goal
piece
here,
of art.
right? And I think his mind going down that particular path
With some refinement along the way.
some refinement along the way, and cool mini or not with their aesthetic
Simon.
Simon with their
We gotta
aesthetic
get at
sensibilities is going to be really fun to watch. I think that particular innovation is really going to be something that creeps up on things.
And they seem to have nailed it. I mean, I was watching the demo tables, and he was pointing out things that were happening to me, and I think it's getting there. Like, you actually get a sense of what these games are. Even the smaller, more simple ones are accomplishing the same thing, using the aesthetics and the tangibility to drive gameplay in a way that is very intentional. That's cool to see. So, Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, it's on my radar now. Like, previous to now, it was like, rank and file.
Yeah.
Really? Like,
Got to work hard to get rank and file on
yeah,
your list.
really. That's really starting on the other end of the spectrum for you.
Now, Rising Sun, though, right?
Yeah, Rising Sun, but I don't know enough about Rising Sun. I talked to Eric extensively about A Song of Ice and Fire. And, I'm interested in these lifestyle type games, so these big miniatures games. And one of the things that I was fascinated by with Song of Ice and Fire was Eric, trying to bridge the gap between board games and miniatures games and bringing board gamers into the miniature space without them knowing it, basically. And, there are some advantages to rank and file that we talked about and whatnot, but one of the things that I was most interested in with this game is his concept of the core mechanics are very limited because the core mechanics that are typically in a miniatures game, like, and these are just wild examples, I don't know if it's actually true, but like morale, terrain, like these kinds of things, mounted, unmounted, these kinds of things.
AoE.
Yeah, they don't actually have a base impact on the game. They only have an impact if any army is building for it to have an impact. So for instance, I might build a deck of my forces and whatnot that has a bunch of cards that say if I'm in higher terrain than my opponent, I get +5 to my thing. Now, so
that rule only applies if you've built for it.
only if I built for it.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
Rather than a universal, I have to okay, what's the range bonus here? What's this? My cards, my force is built to take advantage of concepts. Like, I could build he told me I could build a Lannister army that is centered around demoralizing my opponent. That to me is really, really juicy.
That's really cool.
I
actually.
love the concept of that.
Well,
taking the rules basically out of the manual and into the cards.
And into the hand.
You're only dealing with the stuff that you need to know right now.
I love
Yeah.
that. I can't tell you how much.
Right.
I love
Looking
that.
at it's automatically looking
Yeah,
up the page
I'm
for
just
you. as
excited
you're
about
doing
it.
It's
that got me
fantastic.
super excited that I don't have to necessarily hit the rule book for this. I read the cards.
And then instead of having to build in, later on you release an expansion, it's like, well, these guys need to use the forest better than the other guys did.
Yeah.
So we have to build in an exception to
Yeah.
you get
Right.
the forest bonus plus this thing. It's like, no, now instead it's just this is your bonus when you're in the forest.
Yeah.
And I can see that on the table. And
that's perfect.
That's actually really cool. I think it's the differences in innovation between, like, to me, Alex Davey with Legion and Eric Lang with Song of Ice and Fire is fascinating.
Yeah.
And I love getting
Perfect.
to experience both
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah.
And we talked to
That's when you're living in a good time.
It's a good time for tabletop.
further on. We talked to Calliope, Ray Wares over there. Had
I
the
love
next
that.
the next 3 Titans series. For those who don't know, this is a
I wasn't
series.
here for these. I'm excited to watch
Yeah,
them.
it's a series that was kickstarted, and they're basically trying to get kind of 12 prolific designers together to build gateway games.
Including Eric.
And Eric did one.
Gateway
this
games
time
is
around.
this is very important because many people may not have heard of Calliope games because they're in the hardcore competitive space. But these gateway games, as Ray talked about, is talking about high value games that you can buy once and play with your family as long as you want.
Get people in. I mean, it's getting
people
people in the door. It's a gateway. And he's talking about targeting like soccer moms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's really talking about expanding the industry outward instead of downward. And
Which is awesome.
I really do think that is an important... There's a brand in the space that definitely needs to be doing that, if not multiple. And speaking of, Mattel was at Gen Con.
Yeah.
The old Rock'em Sock'em
Yeah,
creators.
so we're kind of back around, like the players who kind of started out here with some of these basic games are finding value back in the space, doing
great.
more designer style games, and so it's really cool to see that. We also talked to Colby at Plaid Hat, all of their kind of what it was like to be acquired twice.
And like an 18
got some new
12-month period.
Ashes releases
Really
in our
cool looking
hands,
Ashes
which
releases.
is cool.
Very neat new miniatures game, but that's all
That
on the video.
storybook thing is
It's so
cool.
it's so smart.
Yeah, I gotta
It's-
check it out.
Your
videos
battlefields
coming.
changes, and then you have the rule again. Kind of like Eric was saying, you have the rules right on the side of every battlefield.
The board game is a storybook that's like 120 pages long. and you open it, and the left side is a grid and a map with stuff that you're moving figures on, and the right side is the rules of that story.
That's cool.
And it's a choose your own adventure.
And
So if you complete it or don't complete it, it takes you to a new
Next
part
page.
of the book.
That's super
as
cool.
I recall, the designer was really fascinated by the whole idea of a fable, and some, if not all, of these adventures at the end of them, when you complete them with either you, your family, your children, has an actual lesson that you've learned by the end of it. Which is
That's really
neat,
cool.
especially for all those parents out there.
That's really cool. Well, and speaking of the Mattel, tell me about, I know that it struck me and you, we were walking around that first day just kind of cruising, Element, the game.
Yeah.
And
There's this rather dashing.
and they're a
is the
division
studio.
of,
Time to find out, the games division, they got acquired, I think in like 2012, 2013, to be the games division of the same publishers that do like Discover magazine,
that's crazy.
which I've actually read before. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So they're the games division of that. So you see these other brands kind of dabbling in the game space, and I thought this was my number one pick from Gen Con. I mean, I'm a certain kind of game player, so I'm not going to say it's the best game.
We've called it folk games in the past.
It is, but it is that. And a lot of people call them abstract games. I don't know that title actually does justice to the
It's
concepts.
almost like whatever the name for the category of games that people that lean towards minimalism would like.
yeah,
And
hey,
even
welcome to
even
Steam,
more
yeah.
so, every game,
Minimalism gaming, right?
every game that we've found that we really like about this feels old. And even in the interview, the guy said that he wanted to feel like it could have been discovered underground in Ireland, and now they're republishing.
And the other thing I've been playing with these is this timelessness. Basically, like, so we've talked about how expandable games, you don't expect to play them forever.
Right.
Really. I mean, let's be realistic, you don't.
Eventually the expansion style.
Yeah, but games like, Checkers, heaven forbid, has a certain timelessness
Mancala.
to the mechanics, Mancala, that you could theoretically play this game forever. And that many cultures have been playing these games
Go,
for a
for
very long time.
instance.
Go, for instance. And you have to wonder if, our entire philosophy on building a business, building an app, building anything, is get it down to its most perfect, most simplistic, most optimized form. So I have to wonder if the interest in these kinds of games is looking for the most optimized, thing. Because if I could potentially play Element for the rest of my life,
Right.
and never see the same scenario, then that is a little bit more exciting and certainly more, honed than the same old Dark Eldar deck that I've seen a million times.
Yeah, I
in a
definitely.
tournament.
I think a big part of it is it's just the whole concept of minimalism or simplicity. It's rather difficult to make a game simple, right? It's really easy to write a 200-page. I won't say easy. It's less difficult, I think, to write a 200-page rule book to account for every possible instance of something happening
Yeah.
than it is to have a 5-page rule book that actually informs everything else after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, where anything that does happen is okay.
Yeah, and so like with Element, to me, we were sitting there watching it. At first, it doesn't look like too much. It's like there's some, I don't know what you would call the models.
The
that are on the
sages,
board.
yeah.
around the board, and some little colored tokens that are fine on the board. And then like as it's getting explained, slowly but surely, I'm like, this
Light
is
bulbs.
Light bulbs, yeah, because this is a extremely well thought out game with a lot of variability and fun and like cleverness built in, with very little going on. You literally have a grid with 4 little miniatures on it and discs of different colors, and you have this. I think I have never played it, but it's on the way. I'm going to get it soon.
I ordered mine as soon as I got back.
It's the reality is that like I feel like you're going to get a very nuanced experience with a lot of theme happening, with almost no components or rules happening.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's really
That's exactly what we're looking for. And we caught up with Torchbearer, with Luke, of course.
Yeah, he's got some
I got
great
the new
stuff coming
GM
out.
screen. I picked up my my Stone Dragon Mountain, and got some player decks too. So
And,
we're
and we
ready to
got
go.
like the Element demo is already up, I think, on
Yeah.
YouTube. And we have
Yeah.
videos and interviews and stuff coming from Gen Con over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So you can find that on the
Also,
channel.
really, just quick one last.
Yes, say
thing
last
we
shout out
haven't
before we get
mentioned.
away from Gen Con.
Tunnels and Trolls.
Meta
OMG
Arcade.
Tunnels and Trolls and Meta
It's,
Arcade.
it's going to hit.
I think it's gonna hit. We
I don't
finally.
know when or how. but
It's
gonna
very
hit.
cool to see someone make promises one year and deliver on those promises the next year. And I have seen it done very, very well by Meta Arcade. The adventures are there. The adventure builder is being built. The assets for all that stuff is there, ready to go. The monetization for creators is also incredibly interesting.
It's basically it's an app that lets you create stories and scenarios for RPGs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it.
Very cool. All right, well, that is our Gen Con recap. We're going to move on to a question this week.
Do this for hours.
That's right. We could have spent a lot more time here, but you can use the hashtag AskCovenant. We'll answer your questions right here on the show. And the question this time is, hey guys, love the show. As a former competitive Netrunner player, I'm not ashamed to admit that I dropped out of the game for a bit thanks to the ubiquity of cards like Rumor Mill, Faust, and the like.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Man or woman after
That's
my own
Andrew Martins. I'm sorry.
okay.
Andrew Martins from YouTube.
Yeah.
With the rotation coming up and a veritable renaissance of YouTube channels showcasing where the game is, do you find it's a good time for players to come back? Have you ever been in a similar situation, and was it easy or difficult to rekindle that spark? P.S. Congrats, Stephen, for making the first A&R PC Hall of Fame class. Yes,
That's
congrats
something really
to
worth talking about. I absolutely, that is so meaningful, honestly. We've talked about, prizes, right? Like that kind of a thing to me, like being inducted to the Hall of Fame by peers, is better than any cash prize could ever.
It's probably the best thing you could have received, because it's not something you have to like take with you and put on a shelf, and it's not cash.
Spags are like the nicest thing. Just like a couple of paragraphs that was just like really exceedingly meaningful. And thank you again if you're listening, Scott. And yeah, I love that community, and I love that this was an initiative just kind of out of nowhere. Like players, lifting up players. I don't feel like I've been out of it for quite a little while, so I was very surprised to get there. But yeah, that's so cool. So first of all, thank you for that. Everybody involved. That's just a great example of exactly what this whole space is and should be about. Mm-hmm. And then about Netrunner, I'm in the exact same place. I gotta be honest with Andrew. I was hoping for something big at Gen Con this year. We've heard a lot of rumors about what's going on with Netrunner. All we got was like kind of more smoke.
It's like, hey, something's coming soon.
Boggs, is saying like, hey, something big is happening soon. Mm-hmm. And even on the fringes of just like talking to the people that I was hoping I could pry some information off of in a personal way, off the record kind of a way. The only on the record things that I got, and I didn't get anything off the record, by the way. I guess I couldn't tell you if I did. But honestly,
that old trap.
Nothing was gained except for we're looking for something, to really take this thing to not a level that might just get it through, but a level that will do it justice and actually accomplish the goal.
Yeah.
Because you have to imagine, there's been rumors about this new Netrunner core set for years. And the reality is, if you put a new core set out and rotate, it really doesn't do it.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
It's the same game. I mean, I think a lot of the problems were in the last few cycles that are still there. And then you just have...
Not only are they still there, but that's all you have.
And that's now the game, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that what we find with Netrunner is the prototype for how we're going to deal with LCGs moving into the future. And if that means always going to a new edition, if it means a dramatic rotation and a change in philosophy on how these games grow and evolve, something like that needs to happen. So I would say, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, if you're interested in the game of Netrunner as it's being played right now, I have heard that it is the most diverse that it has ever been in terms of just like the number of decks, the number of philosophies, the number of random things that are just showing up and dominating. It's a very exciting time for the game. However, if you feel as overwhelmed as I do about where to even get involved again and what kind of a deck you would bring and play and be relevant with, I think we need something bigger to happen before we're going to get a mass influx of people back into this game. And I just hope that it happens soon and soon enough to not see everybody kind of like move past it. And this is the kind of game that is good enough that I don't know that you could ever lose a Netrunner player.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, you could temporarily stop playing Netrunner, but I don't know of anybody who
still in your bones
was a Netrunner player who would not consider themselves still a Netrunner. There's something very special about this game, so we just need to crack the dynamite, and everyone will come back.
I think for me, like, I'm hopeful that we've seen it in the past sometimes, right, where like FFG rebooted Thrones, or FFG, even on a bigger level, changes how they're interacting with the industry or what they're deciding to do. So I hope we get something big, and I hope that it kind of feels like to me, like now that we're at the point where rotation's about to happen, because we're, I think, one pack away for Netrunner.
And it is going to happen earlier.
Before Worlds, yeah. And so I just get the sense that like the rotation, idea when these LCGs were young was better than nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm also at this point pretty convinced that it's just not even.
It's not the answer.
It's not the answer.
The market is ready now.
I mean, rotation was the answer for a collectible card game design in the 90s.
I think that's the trick. It's like we talked about in the LCG Sustainable podcast episode, but it's like I think it's not more like further down the road. I think it's turning left or right.
Yeah.
And doing something that only an LCG can do.
Yeah.
Where a CCG can't. So I'm hopeful that they'll swing for the fences, especially with Netrunner, because it is the LCG that kind of launched the, you had Thrones and Lord of the Rings before that, but Netrunner was the first like massive,
it was
successful
more than they could
LCG,
understand.
Yeah.
And it is objectively one of the best games of all time.
Undoubtedly.
So
the system is
I would love
incredible.
to see a big shakeup.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one last thing. I think LCGs reinvented the way that games are distributed through
Card games,
card games, and now I think it's time for them to step up and reinvent how they're rotated.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see it. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, you can use the hashtag AskCovenant, and we'll answer your question right here on the show. We also like to ask you a question that you can answer in the comments, and the question for this episode is, are you going to play L5R, and if so, what are you most excited about? Until next time, keep playing.